smell floating over our ghetto when the bodies were cremated after they've been shot.
For me, the past doesn't exist anymore. And I just don't want to think about it and just ignore it, if you can.
To me, the main problem was to cure them morally. I had to struggle with myself. How to teach a Jewish child to love a German flower. I saw in them children, human beings, Jewish children, future citizens of our Jewish state, which will come.
20 years ago, you rescued these people, helped them as children to escape from post-war Europe and the aftermath of Hitler's hell. July 1947, in Haifa Harbor, they figured in an international drama, 4,500 Jews aboard the SS Exodus in a desperate attempt to land in Palestine. They were stopped, one step short of home. 2 decades later, June 1967, they figured in still another and greater international drama. With 2.5 million other citizens of Israel, they stood fast, and in 6 lightning days, they answered those who, again in our generation, spoke of and threatened mass extermination, and sealed the centuries-long battle for survival by redeeming a prophecy. Who are these men and women who fashioned a military miracle? What moves them to fight so hard, to stand so fast and so well? How and where did they learn to turn almost certain defeat into victory? What sort of people are they who have declared that never again will they be victims? These were much the same questions we asked ourselves in the film search you are about to see. A search that set out to trace the whereabouts and well-being of these orphans and survivors of 20 years ago. Stirred by this picture in our archives, we were determined to bridge the passage of time, to trace their journey, to seek them and find them, and to tell their story, the 20 years of homecoming and the miraculous saga of the children of the Exodus. My report spans 2 decades. It opens here, before the 6-Day War. That time, 1 million years ago, that was just yesterday. The occasion? Independence Day in Israel. The place? Haifa, Israel's great port city, symbol of freedom for old settlers and newcomers alike. A man who would soon stand the test of crises. Levi Eshkol, Prime Minister of the land. For trim young cadets who did not know that within months they would be in Sinai. Haifa, freedom, fulfilled for so many of these fighters and survivors of yesterday's death camps. Haifa, where for the moment spectators discover the magic of the word holiday, Yom Tif. But today's holiday in Haifa for some special few here triggers moments of painful recall. The present marches by neatly, properly, in step. But how often for some does the not-so-dead past fall in step as well? Here today in the north of Israel, 1/7 of the nation has come together. 350,000 people gathered to take a little sun and great pride. To be renewed and even to forget. But some can't help but remember. For those special few, for myself, looking up, also set us to looking back. recalling the look of this port city just yesterday.
20 years ago, when Haifa witnessed British rule and blockade, 20 years ago, a million years ago, when down at the dockside you could hear the pain-filled joy from a rare boatload that had made it out. Survivors with visas officially permitted to take the last giant step out of Hitler's hell. But more often then, before independence, you could hear the shriek of stunned silence from captive thousands. Homeless Jews, refugees, orphans, caught trying to slip through the British Coastal Patrol. Imprisoned and shipped back to the barbed wire, to the DP camps, to Cyprus, to Europe, to the black pit of history. To post-war Germany. Just yesterday, when the word and the smell of crematoria still was fresh. Just yesterday, when justice, long overdue, was beginning to figure the cost. 6 million Jews murdered, a Jewish past and present lost. And in the 6 million, more than 1 million children, a Jewish future seemingly doomed. Surviving, a remnant, a handful, homeless, orphan children who too might vanish if they were not gathered up and called in soon. From the basement world of bombed-out cities, from roads swollen with refugees, from Europe's score of DP camps. Soon, almost out of nowhere, there were silent shepherds, busy rounding up the strays and the lost flocks. From the Jewish Agency for Palestine and the American Joint Distribution Committee, aided by the United Jewish Appeal, guides, teachers, instant parents, to tend the children, train them for their exodus. From everywhere along a vast underground railroad, the traffic streamed. Destination, home, Palestine. Ahead they came in those days of illegal immigration. However, nonetheless, regardless, out of the Balkans, out of Eastern Europe, out of Poland, out of Germany, rescued and secretly moved across the checkerboard of Europe to Mediterranean ports no further than a sigh from Haifa.
Faces of forgotten children, filed away in the archives and recently come to light. There was one picture of special interest, a railroad convoy of children. According to the note on the back, we knew no more than this. What has become of them? We were determined to find them again. 20 years later, where to begin? Where should we look for them in this land miraculously reborn, renewed? Where? In the bustle of a country 20 years young, busy acquiring a free nation's know-how. Where should one look in this land of the open door, across whose threshold more than 1.25 million refugees had been welcomed, and day by day are being welcomed still from Europe, Africa, and Asia? Where to find them? Here in Haifa, or further south in Tel Aviv, or perhaps on this corner of a street in Jerusalem. In what kibbutz? New town, old town. How old would they be now? 25, 30, 35? Had the scars healed? Had they grown new skin, new faces? For many weeks, with the help of friends, we sought them everywhere, in town and in the country, among the living and even the dead. Among the young newcomers of 20 years ago who took an immediate hand in the fighting for Israel's freedom and immediately paid for it. We looked, we asked, and we kept on looking, by day and by night. Files were checked, people questioned, advertisements placed in the newspapers. And then it happened, our first breakthrough. An appeal to the public was broadcast over radio Kol Yisrael. Anyone having information about train convoy of children left Munich June 1947, destination Marseille, Palestine, please help us. Our first response came from, of all people, a staff member of the radio station itself in Jerusalem, the director of Kol Yisrael's youth choir. His name, Tzvi Ben Porat. 20 years ago, homeless, an orphan himself. No, unfortunately, he had been with another train convoy, part of that great tide out of Europe in the spring of '47. Yes, there was someone whom he was sure could help us. This man, Joseph Barniv of Tel Aviv, on the staff of Youth Aliyah in 1947, stationed in France, working to round up the surviving children to bring them to Palestine. I remember that afternoon when he brought our search a step closer to success.
Oh, das bin Zaniere.
Joseph Barniv had identified himself, and although he did not recognize any of the children, he did spot one of their instructors, Yaakov Tobiasz, a school teacher from Poland, who single-handedly spirited more than 100 children away from the advancing Nazis, hid them, held them together all through the war, and led them miraculously to safety. A chateau just outside of Paris, financed by the UJA as a rest center for rescued children, where he was known and loved by thousands of homeless children in transit. The man who taught them Hebrew was their father, mother, guardian, playmate, who helped to link them once again to their people. Tobiasz, we found him 20 years later, as ever himself, a school principal now, in the old new town of Sfat, recalling the saga of an exodus before their own. Yet Tobiasz had been in touch with so many groups passing through, too many to remember the faces of those in our convoy. Yet Tobiasz provided us with our third and decisive lead, directing us to the experts in remembering, who live here, near the Crusader city of Akko, in the kibbutz of the ghetto fighters, museum, archive, and home of survivors of the ghettos of Poland and Lithuania, particularly the Warsaw Ghetto. They are experts here in remembering each extermination and each act of Jewish defiance. Experts, too, in fighting against the victory of something called mass production murder, a world of just yesterday, seen through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy, a child's drawings of the day-to-day, from deportation to death. Here, among the reminders of such camps as infamous Treblinka, which devoured 800,000 people. Here, among the kibbutz members, such as this teacher and architect, survivors of Treblinka, we felt we could surely come up with a conclusive identification. No, but they would post the pictures in their dining room. Someone in the kibbutz was bound to remember. 2 weeks later, success, a telephone call. One of the adults in the train convoy has been recognized. She can be found in a kibbutz near Haifa, kibbutz Yagur, her name, Golda Mintz.
Yes, that's me, at the train which took the children out of Germany. And most of them live here in Israel. Especially I remember two sisters, Dina and Chava. To me, they remained for all my life the symbol of Jewish afterwar, misery of Jewish orphans.
Golda Mintz, supervisor of the kibbutz nursery, who first came here to Yagur from Poland in 1933. During World War II, she trained to parachute behind the Nazi lines. After the war, she was sent by the Jewish Agency to work in Europe's DP camps and help prepare the children for their flight out of Germany.
All meeting with people there was a monologue. They couldn't stop telling their terrible past. And you had to be only a pair of ears to listen, once and twice and over again. Almost the same story, but from different mouths. And I always thought it took so much time, but maybe that is the most important thing I have to do, to listen, to give the opportunity to pour out what lies and makes heavy the heart, to give an opportunity to cry. The children were victims of the war. They lost any sound, human, natural attitude to things which people have. They broke furniture. They pull out with the roots bushes. I tried to teach them to grow plants, to build houses, to build factories, to work in them, to make things and not to destroy them. I accompanied these children to Strasbourg, and then I went back to my work in Germany. Further, I don't know, but I heard that in Tel Aviv lives now a woman. She was then a young girl. Her name is now Fela Medalia. She was with this transport, and she kept a diary. I wrote a diary at the time. I was about 17. We left Munich on the 1st of July, 1947. We traveled in cattle trains until the French border, and then we got onto ordinary human trains. We got to a small town near Marseille and waited there, and it was about 10 days later that we embarked on the Exodus.
Exodus 47, a former Chesapeake Bay ferry boat crammed with thousands. July 18, 1947, rammed by a British destroyer, boarded after fierce fighting and brought into Haifa, where British Foreign Minister Bevan had ordered her passengers to be shipped back to Germany.
Bevan realized that public opinion in the world, even public opinion in England, would be strongly against sending Jews back to Germany by force. So he tried before to land them in France.
What do you intend to do? Do you want to land, or are you going back to Palestine? Let's go to Palestine!
And so he had to send them back to Germany. This made a very deep impression on public opinion in the world, but he continued the same policy. About 8 months after the accident of Exodus, he proclaimed the independent Jewish state, and then the gates of Israel became open for all Jews who wanted to come back. And we saw the main task of the Jewish state to take in as many Jews who are willing to come, not only to take in, but to settle them on the land, if possible, to teach them Hebrew, and to make them as original members of the new Jewish nation.
Ben-Gurion in history saw to it. The children in our train convoy turned back at Haifa returned. Many came here to this kibbutz, high in the Galilee. This settler, in charge of leading young immigrants through an intensive course in basic Hebrew, recalled them and finally located them for us.
I am Alti Goldstein. I was 9 months in Auschwitz, then in Hungary, and later in Germany. I know all these boys. I was their madrich. After they came to Israel in 48, we lived together. This is Aviva from Not Mordechai, Yaakov Weltz, Natanya, and Kennedy in Kiryat Shmona, Smadar in Kibbutz Palmach Tzuba.
Located 20 years later, Tzvi Smodor, member of the Home Guard, serving on the Jerusalem front during the 1967 threat to his people's independence and sovereignty. Liberated in 1945 from the Budapest ghetto, for 2 years after the war, homeless. Tzvi Smodor, Israeli farmer, father of a small boy, home at last, near Jerusalem, in kibbutz Palmach Tsuba. Lost and found, Aviva Yaniv, survivor of the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria. In 1947, a youth leader in charge of the youngsters. And today, following the June 1967 emergency, back to work as a business manager of the apple cider bottling plant, the mainstay of a frontier community in Israel's north, where she, her husband, and 2 children live alongside the Jordan River.
Yes, it is my picture. My name is Aviva Yaniv. I live now here in Neot Mordechai the last 5 years. At this time, I was 20 years old, and I was a madricha of a group of children. When I first saw the picture, I was very excited. I can remember all. This is Chava, this is Dina, and this is Judith. Especially I can remember Judith because I mended her dress here.
כן, זאת אני.
Her name, Judah Schalk, formerly of Czechoslovakia, one of the many thousands of Jewish children hidden and saved by a Gentile family. One of the fortunate few in those days who, having a lost father to rejoin, could enter Palestine legally. Her address today, Ramat Gan, a suburb of Tel Aviv.
But whenever I meet one of them, it's the deepest joy to look at their faces, to see their children healthy, joyous Sabbaths. And sometimes I feel happy that I give maybe something, very little, to bring them to this day.
Located, Tzvi Kennedy, born in Hungary, at 15 his own liberator, breaking out of a concentration camp in Yugoslavia, and then across a minefield to join up with the partisans. Years later, still a fighter in the Six-Day War, helping to storm the heavily fortified Golan Heights above Lake Galilee and defeat an enemy that for years sought to terrorize stubborn Jewish border settlements below. Tzvi Kennedy in peacetime, key member of a bus cooperative, resident of Kiryat Shmone, a new immigrant development town in Israel's north, introducing new immigrant children to the Galilee of their biblical ancestors, a free land, a land he has repeatedly fought for. Lost and found, Jacob Welz, at Auschwitz, stripped of his family. More recently, during the 1967 emergency, on active duty with Israel's top-notch, efficient citizen army. Lost and found, Jacob Welz. In peace, a householder and citizen of Netanya, where he works as a diamond polisher and helps newcomers, such as this North African apprentice, to join the mainstream of a modern-paced, free people.
I recognized the other boys from their face, but Leffler from his football shoes. Yes, he loved to play football.
And still does. Lost and found, located and identified. 20 years later, Chaim Leffler, survivor of Bergen-Belsen, director of youth activities for the Upper Galilee, who works to help the young people find and make a place for themselves. In Carmel, one of Israel's new raw frontier towns. Carmel, where the order of the day is to blend newcomers into a productive community, to make sure that they have jobs, that their children have proper schools, youth facilities, to make sure that new immigrants quickly acquire a solid sense of their role in their country's future, such as has marked Leffler's service in days of peace and in war. Israel, where after 20 years each man can sit beneath the shade of his fig tree and root for the home team. Israel, where a man can savor the sweet feeling of heading home at long last a winner. A winner. Our story, whose hinge was high for 20 years ago, carries us here to the holy city of Jerusalem and to the Western Wall, remembered by generations past, redeemed by this generation by the children of the Exodus. You helped to rescue and by their children. 20 years that began just yesterday. 20 years that record an ordeal and a miracle during which a land changed its name from Palestine to Israel, in which hundreds of thousands of the homeless have been helped to renew themselves, to make the jump from refugee to immigrant, to citizen of a free nation. 20 years in which the job of building for peace has moved many steps forward, and men now as never before sense the link of their brotherhood and the continuing drama of the works and joys of a people come home.
כולם ביחד כיפק, כולם ביחד כיפק, כיפק